Welcome anybody who is here now or joining in the future. It's been a while since I've done a stream, but we're back with a special guest today. His name is Michael McAdams. He is a co-author of a book called An Angel Told Me So, which is a collection of messages and teachings dictated from spiritual teachers and angels. I'll let him sort of give the rest. Hopefully that was justice to the book there, Michael.
It was just fine. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Kay.
Yep. Yep, not a problem. So, just to give you sort of a little introduction to me before we get started here, I feel similar to you. I was reading your foreword and some of your preemptive chapters in the book, where you were talking about your life, kind of how you grew up a little bit. And I feel similar to you in a lot of ways, specifically when it comes to this feeling of purpose, meaning specifically related to truth seeking and curiosity about what's true about the world. I don't know if I already said this, but I was raised LDS. And ever since I was a kid in that faith, all the way through my cringy atheist era and up until now, I've always felt this kind of like calling, I guess you could call it, through all my different phases. So would you mind giving us kind of a small backstory of your life and kind of how you got to where you are now?
No, I appreciate that. And I was brought up with a foundation of faith. You know, most all of us are. If our parents have a foundation of faith, a particular religion, that's normally where you start. I mean, we aren't born with a foundation of faith. It has to be something that's learned. And we're taught, about heaven and hell and, various points of view. And I was brought up Pentecostal, which is pretty hardcore, pretty strict, liberal interpretation of the Bible. My mother was extremely religious because her mother had been extremely religious. Her mother, my grandmother, was a Pentecostal pastor, and she pastored a small church north of Cincinnati. My uncle was a fiery Pentecostal preacher, pastor. He could move a crowd. And he was, just old time religion. And so that was my upbringing. But even when I was young, as I sat in the pew and listened to my uncle preach and talk about heaven and hell, there were just a number of things that didn't seem to sit right with me, even at a young age. And as I became older, I became more spiritual than religious. I spent 2 years in the army in Germany. And when I came back, I had become involved in spiritual material, psychics, that sort of thing, just interesting, just investigating. And I actually ended up with a table. I had a table at a group called Psychic World in Cincinnati. And I was able to do readings for people. It's called psychometry. And that's the ability to hold rings, watches, keys, anything that carries a person's vibration. And I had a tablet, legal tablet. They would sit down at my table. I would just ask their first name, wouldn't engage in information or try and pump them for information. They would give me something to hold. And I would just relax my mind and a message. I would start to get a message for them, sometimes page and a half. When it got to the end, it would stop. And I would read the message to them. Sometimes they'd cry. And it was more confirmation as to what they were going through rather than actual prophecy. And I didn't think I was doing anything special. It just came naturally. And I believe that we all have this ability to receive, to communicate with the spiritual realm, our spirit teachers, spirit guides, which are the same thing as angels, just viewed from a different perspective. So that was my journey to that point. And I just continued to receiving and investigating and being led in a direction that allows us to make the acquaintance with people that will help us on our journey.
Cool. All right. And so I also noticed sort of you said you're more spiritual than kind of religious, but there is from what I've gathered kind of an undertone of Christian theology perhaps within your perspective here, calling God Christ and whatnot. Is that accurate?
Well, the messages and teachings themselves, and that's something that I noticed throughout the 22 years that these messages and teachings were received, and they were dictated. This wasn't channeling. If you know what channeling is, this wasn't automatic writing. When Wilma Jean, my mother, was led to sit down in these dedicated sessions, she had set up an electric typewriter in her kitchen. She would be led in her mind, we have a message for you. She would go in and sit down, light a candle, say a prayer, ask for protection, because you are opening your mind. And she would see 3 or 4 words just float into her mind and hang there. They would not go away until she typed them. Once she typed those 3 or 4 words, they would just fade away and 3 or 4 more would show up. That's how she got these messages. Full page, single space typed, many times with no paragraphs. And these spirit teachers in these messages repeatedly reference God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit in these messages, which leads me to believe that that is real. It's the perspective and the story that we've been told all of our lives, and this perspective of life on this physical plane, existence, and what happens when we cross over, that I think organized religion, we'll call it organized religion, foundation of faith, they're just so dependent on either heaven or hell as the only 2 options that's going to happen when we cross over. And I've always had a problem with heaven and hell as a final destination for all eternity, forever and ever. So these spirit teachers offer a perspective of existence in the spiritual realm and what it means to be on this physical plane and the consciousness that we have in these physical bodies.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much you know about LDS theology, but you may appreciate some of their insights, because I agree with you 100%. I've never liked this kind of binary, like you're going to hell for eternity or you've made it to the kingdom for eternity, and you have no more growth, no more progression. You're just in heaven now. But it's interesting with LDS theology, they actually have multiple kingdoms, different like spirit prisons, they'll call them, where you can keep progressing. And heaven is actually split into 3 itself. There's like a higher tier, a medium tier, and a lower tier, sort of to categorize people. It's still not something I prefer or believe in, but it just seems a lot more gracious and merciful than off to the pits of hell you go.
All right, I agree. Or going to heaven for all eternity, and that this blink of an eye existence in relative terms, that we live in these physical bodies, that we would go to a place forever and ever and do what? The good place. What are you going to do? How can you grow? We're life and existence in the physical realm requires choices and decisions to make.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're in a place where there are no choices and no decisions and everything is provided, how can you grow? How can you continue to progress? And then with hell, I like to share a story. I knew a woman, a lady one time, who had a son who was constantly getting into trouble, constantly. From the time he was 14 years old till he was 28, the money that this family spent on bail and fines and attorneys and court appearances, it was just a nightmare for the family. And she was brought up Baptist, extremely religious, carried a Bible with her everywhere she went to church on Sundays and Wednesday evenings. And she knew the spiritual vein, the spiritual material that I was involved in. But she absolutely knew that she was going to heaven and that hell was real. And I asked her one time, I said, is there anything that your son could do, anything at all, that would cause you not to want to give him another chance? And she just put her head down and said, no. I said, what makes you think God loves us any less? Do you really believe that based upon this short time that we're in this physical existence, that we're going to spend all eternity, forever and ever, with punishment and damnation because we were stupid, because we chose bad friends, had bad parents, born to bad circumstances? And everything is a test. Everything is to allow us to overcome and depending upon, the direction that we want our life to go. And so that's why it just doesn't seem to make any sense that we would be sentenced to all eternity for punishment
Yep.
when you could have a do-over. And if you're open to that, then you're open to reincarnation.
Yeah. Well, this is great. I think we'll be on a similar page for a lot of things. I mean, even some of the ways you talk about hell and stuff, honestly, sounds like a lot of atheists that I listen to sometimes, right? Where this is their sort of criticism of dogmatic religious structures. Um, so, and the heaven part specifically, too, I agree with you 100%. Like, that heaven would almost feel like a hell to me if I was stagnant. I had no room for change and growth to become a better person, no progress whatsoever. Doesn't sound like an eternity that I want to be a part of. So, yeah, I agree with your takes there. Um, so I'm curious because of this, though, and especially because you sort of talk about God and Christ. Um, do you ever get lashed out at or accusations of being heretical from some of these more fiery preachers or religious institutions? Do you hear much of that at all, or do you not really pay attention if people are hating, I guess?
I would really enjoy the conversation. I don't get a chance to talk to many ministers or preachers. I mean, this is their living. This is their vocation. And their only reference is the Bible. And when you think about who Jesus was, and Jesus incarnated into the body of the baby born to Joseph and Mary. Jesus existed in a spiritual realm, which again, Christians would call heaven. But I believe that the spiritual realm is much more, again, than just a place called heaven. And Jesus couldn't begin to share what he knew and where he had come from because 2,000 years ago, the people weren't ready to hear it. I mean, think about the mindset of the people 2,000 years ago. They couldn't even conceive of a spiritual realm, a vibration, a frequency, another dimension that we would cross over to, and that there would be no death. We never really die. It's just graduation. We ride around in these bodies the way we ride around in our cars. These bodies are just a vehicle to negotiate this physical plane. And when it's our time to graduate, to cross over, I believe that our consciousness, we might step out of our body, glance back, say, thanks for the ride. You served me well. And then we move on to what? An evaluation center where we get to look back at our life, see how we lived, how we treated people, what we did wrong, what we could have done better. We don't really know. And then are we reassigned to another set of parents in a certain social station to continue our journey for whatever it is we're supposed to learn in that lifetime? So as far as your question, I don't really get any negative feedback. Most of the people that I talk to, and I don't know if I'm just being led to these people, but on my website, spiritspeaks.com, it says for all sincere seekers of truth. And then it says when the student is ready, a teacher will appear. And for me, that statement has always been appropriate for my life because as a seeker, I reached out. I didn't want to just believe, I wanted to know. And by having that mindset, you're led to a book, an event, a speaker, a movie, whatever it is that's going to take you that next step in your journey, and that it allows you to continue to evolve and to learn and grow and become.
Yeah, and by the way, just for anyone listening, I have linked that website in the description as well as the title of the book. Just want people to know that in case they're curious and want to check it out. And yeah, and just so you know as well, Michael, I'm sort of testing the edges of kind of our agreements and whatnot right now, which I feel like we're having a lot more than I was expecting. Because, like I said, usually when I read Christ of being God and all of this stuff, I more expect the other side of the religious dogmas that we're talking about, right? So happy to hear that you're not really in that camp. But because another, you were kind of talking about this body as a vessel until we graduate to the next realm or whatever. And part of another thing I don't really like about strict dogmatic religious institutions is it seems like this life is like dirty rags, right? And we just have to get through this one to reach the next one. There doesn't seem to be any appreciation for these bodies, this earth, this world that we embody right now in the present moment. So it sounds like your spiritual outlook has a lot more room for that. It's not just a vehicle to leave behind, but it's something to think as we leave behind because it served us well. So it's, anyway, that's just another part that I appreciate about your outlook here.
Well, I agree. And this is a transition stage. And I believe that we're always in a transition stage. And when you think about the lives, many lives that people are living all over the globe on this planet, how many of us would see lives that people are living and think that would be hell? Drug addicts dying on the street in LA. People, look what people are going through in communist China, North Korea, Iran right now. And their lives are a living hell. And is that the punishment that they were given based on what they had done previously? Or was it an opportunity to learn so they'd be better the next time? We don't really know, but I just think they talk about the continuity of life and that life does not end. And I believe that is true. And these spirit teachers that exist in this spiritual realm, the perspective that they share, again, they do mention God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, but the perspective that they share. When Wilma Jean was first, when she had been receiving these messages for, I'd say, a good 10 years, in the book, An Angel Told Me So. And by the way, if I may, that is the book. And that is my mother. That was my mother, Wilma Jean, on the front cover. And she received these messages and teachings for 22 years. But she was not sure. A lot of the messages were personal to her and to me. She went through a divorce. I've gone through a divorce. And she wasn't really sure that she wanted to put these messages and teachings in a book. I told her they were just too profound, too applicable to everyone that reads them. And she was working around the kitchen one day, and this message, this word started to come into her mind in thought. She knew it was incoming. She picked up pen and paper. She had beautiful handwriting, and she wrote this message out in longhand. And she felt this was a message, was confirmation that she should put these messages and teachings in a book. It wasn't very long. May I share this with you and your audience, Kay?
Yeah, please.
So this is what she received. Emptiness is part of fulfillment. Let your resources fill the void left so that distinction of your purpose can be found. Expression is always self-explanatory. Therefore, look inside and anchor all your beliefs beside those still waters that will take away your troubled view and renew your strength to recapture that which was lost, but is now found to be adequate to pursue the course set before you. And as you reconcile your being to represent those qualities that have been left intact, God will see to it that although circumstances have been trying, to say the least, your weariness will disappear as clouds once removed allow the sun to shine to dispel the gloom and darkness that has pervaded your countenance. And as once described before, a token of this presence will be deposited to your account and books recorded in his name.
So what's I guess it's not funny, but I'm smiling because I had a quote written out here in my notes that from the book that I was going to bring up to talk to you about, and it's the first 3 sentences of that passage that you just read. So you started reading that, and it's a perfect transition into where I was wanting to go anyway. The first 3 sentences that I wrote down is just that emptiness is part of fulfillment. Let your resources fill the void left so that distinction of your purpose can be found. Expression is always self-explanatory. I wrote these down because I've been studying some mysticism lately, which is where I'm sort of finding myself kind of becoming, like, I think that's how I'm categorizing myself nowadays, but very much a naturalist mystic. And what I find so cool about mysticism is there are a few principles that just seem to be universal across all mystic writers and teachers. One of them is sort of this like emptiness, like void being filled with presence, type of message. So I was amazed when I read that, because it reminded me of all the things I had been studying. So I do think there is something sort of universal to mystical experiences, let's call them. And I think that was right on the money.
Well, I agree. Thank you. And the reception of information, there are so many people that receive, and they may think it's their intuition, their imagination, their conscience. Um, and you're driving in the car with the radio turned off, not really thinking about anything. And a thought comes into your mind and it says, I'd slow down up ahead if I were you. You're obedient, you're paying attention, you glance in the rearview mirror, you don't see anything, but you lift off the gas and you top a little rise on the freeway, and there sits a state highway patrol. Or you're approaching an intersection and you slowed down and you didn't get hit by the dump truck that ran the red light. Where does that come from? And I believe that comes from our spirit guides, spirit teachers who are assigned to us and are looking out for us. And people, they say, well, I would like to be able to receive, I would like to be able to be in touch with my own spirit teachers, but I'm afraid. They have fear that negative energy might come through, or some negative entity might slip in. And I tell people, I say the best way to offer a protection, an aura of protection, a filter, is to say an affirmation. And I mean, people may have their own way of filtering out any negative information or being able to touch base with their spirit teachers. But an affirmation was given to me years ago, so long ago, I don't remember when I didn't have it. And it said, let no thoughts, ideas, or information be made known to my mind that does not come from God or his direct representatives. And let that be your filter, your aura of protection. And these spirit guides, these spirit teachers, again, same thing as angels, just viewed from a different perspective, are all God's direct representatives.
Okay. This is, well, I guess specifically for someone like me, Michael, who you don't know me very well yet, but hopefully you can just trust what I tell you. I genuinely have been a truth seeker, studied a lot of philosophy, different religions, and I really do care about what's true out there. And even going so far as trying to take my non-believer hat off as best as I can, open my heart up, open my mind up, pray, ask for guidance. Even at one phase in my life, I did sort of rituals like what you're talking about, like protective rituals, asking for angels to protect me and guide me. I even have some of these things written down in a little book that I used to use. Even going so far, and you would probably tell me to pump the brakes here, but even going so far as to ask the devil and demons to interact with me, opening myself up to the quote evil forces, because I was so desperate to find a real answer for something supernatural, as it were, to manifest in my life in some way. All of these went unsuccessful, we could say. And I know you sort of talk about some people not being ready, some people not being open. But for me, I think it's a little frustrating because I have tried many, many times in my life. When I was a child, I remember times being on my knees praying to Jesus in tears because I was in pain and I needed help, and feeling left alone in those moments. So I guess this is where it's hard for someone like me to believe, like, why can't I have this connection with these spirit guides if they genuinely care about my life and my well-being and everything?
I think that you really do have that connection. It's really just a matter of, it's not so much paying attention to it, but allowing it to flow into your mind. That's what's coming to me. There is attention given to these spirit guides and spirit teachers, and recognizing an incoming thought, anything that's shared. And the Bible says, test the spirit. And these spirit guides, spirit teachers, they don't mind taking a quiz. And if you have any situation at all that you're dealing with, any circumstance, we all have been born with this pesky little gift called free will. And we can accept or reject any advice, guidance, direction, or support that we're given. We can make decisions based upon our own emotions and our attitudes, or we can relax our mind, deal with the situation, and find out what their recommendation might be. And then we have the choice. We can go with our own thoughts and what our own, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is the way I feel I should handle it. Or we can go with their recommendation. I did actually earlier this morning, I did an interview with two guys with a radio show in the UK. And I was explaining this, and this guy got a look on his face, and it was like, you won't believe what happened to me. And he said, this happened years ago. And he said, it just came into my mind. And he said that he was walking out. He had been somewhere walking to his car, and he started to reach for the door handle. And this thought came into his mind, and it said, walk around the car one time before you open the door. And it said, you'll save a life. And he thought, well, this is interesting. So he walked around the car, opened the door, got in, and pulled out of the parking spot in where he was parked. And a guy on a motorcycle blew up and hit the front of his car and flipped over the hood and landed on the pavement on the other side of his car. And the guy got up, he was okay. And he said, I didn't see you pulling out. And that saved that guy's life, because if he had pulled out when he would have gotten in the car and just pulled out, he would have hit the guy broadside and killed him. And it works that way. It's just it's not a command, it's a suggestion. And if you just be open to the communication that can be received on a daily basis. There is a book on my website, spiritspeaks.com. In the Great Links page, there is a link to a book called the Urantia book, which is really interesting. You were talking about various levels that the LDS talks about, and the Urantia book does share information about various levels of the spiritual realm. But there's also a section in there that talks about personalized thought adjusters, like a guardian angel. And it says that when we make our first moral decision, a decision that shows that we know right from wrong, they said normally about the age of 4 to 4.5 years old, that we are then assigned a personalized thought adjuster, guardian angel, spirit teacher, and that spirit teacher, that thought adjuster, will stay with us for life, help us along our way, help us make decisions, protect us, advise us. But again, because of that pesky little gift called free will, we can accept it or ignore it. And if we ignore it, we normally do so at our own peril. So it's really just a matter of finding out what works for you, for anyone, and then being able to, with this material, this information, these messages and teachings, to be able to see what is available and what can be received. The depth and quality of this material amazes me to this day. And I believe that's, we're all on our own journey in the path that we walk.
Well, I think that me and you probably have some disagreement about free will, but maybe we could save that for later and get into those weeds if we have time. Um, but I still, I guess, what's the best way to put this? I've had moments where I feel like I'm going with some internal dialogue, say. Um, I just don't know how I would ever be able to distinguish that as my own thoughts manifesting my life and my intuitions, versus something that's perhaps guiding me and interjecting into my thoughts. Um, yeah.
The best way, and I tell people, I said, incoming thoughts, anything that's given to our mind, has a different feel in our mind than a thought that we think. I mean, we can think anything, look out the window, look around our room, and we can think anything that we want. But when our mind is quiet, when you've quieted your mind, not really thinking about anything, and then a thought will come in. I'd slow down a bit if I were you. I wouldn't buy that car if I were you. You're thinking about handling a situation in a certain way, and it says, I'd wait. I wouldn't make that phone call right now. And we're spoken to in thought. And those thoughts have a different feel in our mind than a thought that we think. And if you can recognize that, then you start to trust it and you start to realize that you're not alone. We are not alone. And that we have this help, guidance, and support that is there with us for a reason. And that reason is because we're on a journey, and this is our journey in this lifetime. And again, when the student is ready, a teacher will appear. And the information, a book, an event, a movie, a speaker, will be made known. And then it's up to the individual as to whether they're ready to take the next step, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. And I guess I still think, as someone who's just skeptical, like, naturally, I I think that anything thought wise come into my head, even if it's sort of a deep subconscious intuition type thing, and maybe a little bit bigger and grander than just me and my ego thinking a thought, I still I still feel like as if it's part of me and not something in interjecting into myself, I guess. Um, the only thing, the only experience I have that is close to this kind of vessel being revealed to that you talk about is so I'm a musician. I like to write songs and stuff. And sometimes I feel like the songs are writing me and I'm not writing the songs. It's just something that's being channeled through me. And this is the only thing that I can describe that's close to what you're describing. However, in my day-to-day life, any intuition I get or thoughts, they all just still feel like it's me and it's not some top-down revelation, I guess.
Well, that is exactly the way it works. And I have heard and read stories of numerous musicians that would sit down and write a hit song in 20 minutes. And they would say the words just flowed. It just came
Hmm.
to my mind. And I believe, it was given that way. And if you don't really need to set aside your own mind, you just need to be simpatico with the spirit teachers, spirit guides that we all have. I mean, we're not alone. We all have these spirit teachers. And if I could share, this is a message that Wilma Jean received. She had she had been receiving messages for a while, and on my website, spiritspeaks.com, there's a tab at the top for a television interview that Wilma Jean gave in Cincinnati. You can scroll down, watch her interview. She's the pretty lady in white on the left. Posted on her interview is a message from volume 2 of the book, which is not out yet. I'm looking for a new publisher. This was the only time in a session where she was led to sit down and receive Two different spirit teachers moved in the same session, gave two different messages, and signed two different names. And it was obvious that the second teacher was a different teacher than the first because the whole cadence and phrasing of the message is different. This first teacher's message was just really little more than a long paragraph. May I share this with you and your audience?
Yeah,
And
please.
again, this lets people see how these spirit teachers speak and the references that they make. So this was the first teacher's message. There is a resurrection period through which man must travel in order to come into the realm of things godlike. You're to consume and digest all that is given here, as this comes from one highly qualified to meet the needs of this generation. You are not the sole property of yourselves. God still holds the everlasting command over your being, and in him must one take refuge. You are to be considered as one who has been stripped of all belongings and left to die by the wayside. In this manner, are you then open to any help that would be forthcoming? You are by your very nature ones who would depend on your own intellect to carry you through. However, by giving of your soul into the hands of God, you prosper and develop more freely into that which denies the outcome of some situations, knowing full well that it is the hand of God leading and directing you so that you may arise victorious in the end. There is never a time when you will be without the Father, nor his ever-loving approaches to see that you follow the path that directs you homeward. Take note that we say homeward. As your heavenly Father so resides in that vast, insurmountable environment of time and space, so shall ye abide in joint communication with him by the grace with which he covers you and by your ability to accept this grace and use it for your own development. There are others here who wish to make themselves known to you, so I will step aside for this time. My love and devotion follows you as you trot onward, but ever faithful to your goal. And that message was signed, your loving guide. Now, that next to the last line is the line that made me sit up and take notice. And he says, there are others here who wish to make themselves known to you. My question is, who are the others and where is here? What do you mean there are others here? Where are you in relation to us on this physical plane?
Right.
And the answer to that is they are in a spiritual realm, the spiritual realm adjacent to this physical plane. It's not up there above the clouds somewhere, up above that we're going to go to, I believe, like you said, for all eternity, that and do what and accomplish what. But they are in a spiritual realm, and Jesus could not have explained this to the people that he lived with 2,000 years ago. They had no concept of another realm, a dimension, a vibration, a frequency. They couldn't have conceived it. So these spirit teachers are aware of us on this side of the spiritual realm, and we are born with this ability, this two-way ability to communicate and receive.
Okay. So a couple things on this. I guess for all intents and purposes, really, would it even matter or make much difference if someone like me, say, who is like a naturalist, I don't really believe in a spiritual realm, but I am a mystic. I believe in sort of an all how do you put it? A whole, like there's just a whole that we're all a part of that we connect to, which gives us kind of this experience that goes outside of explainable conscious experience, and often guides our intuitions. It's not rational, it's not logical, it's not something you observe with tools and instruments, but it's still a way that we live through our intuitions. So really, is there much of a difference someone living the way I do, listening to my intuitions, sort of giving that credit to myself, my experience, and someone like you who is listening to spirit guides, kind of guiding your intuition? It almost seems like it could go the same way as long as we're kind of following those intuitions. What we're naming it doesn't matter as much.
Well, I agree. I agree. It's really a matter of perspective and how we look at existence. But if for people who feel there has to be more than just an eternal, place of bliss or eternal punishment, we are we are a consciousness in a shell, this physical body. And when this physical body wears out, like our cars wear out, and we cross over, we graduate, we have to go somewhere. Our consciousness, our spiritual self has got to be somewhere if it's not in this body. And what is on the other side of this physical plane is the spiritual realm. And again, Christians would call it heaven, but it is much more than just a place called heaven. And the journey that we're on, the parents that we're born to, the circumstance that we find ourselves in, we're all a product of our choices and decisions. And our entire life path has been based on our choices and decisions. And there are people that are desperate and say, God, why did you allow me to end up this way? And well, I didn't have anything to do with it. It was your choices and decisions that caused you to be on the street in LA, doing fentanyl and taking your last breath. That wasn't my, I didn't have anything to do with that. But we are on a journey, and what you're doing and what I'm doing, I feel is inspirational to the people that get to share in this information. We're shining a light on a path. They're on a journey, we're on a journey, and we're shining a light on a path saying, hey, look over here. You would like to be over here, but you've gone off on a tangent. And let me help you get back on the path that you would like to be on. Because there are people that are desperate. How did I get here? Why am I going through all this? Why am I having to deal with all this? And again, we're all a product of our choices and decisions. So people have the ability to read this information, be able to see how these spirit teachers, the advice they offer, the guidance, the direction. And in volume 1 of An Angel Told Me So, it was amazing to me. And I've been involved in spiritual material for 30 years, and I've never read anything like this. The messages and teachings that Wilma received in volume 1 were pretty much all personal messages to her and to me. But it's like they're woven with a universal thread. And everyone who has read these messages have said, well, this sounds like what I'm dealing with. This sounds like they're talking to me. And I tell people, I say, when you get the book, read each message once as it was given for Wilma Jean and given for me. Then read that same message again as if it's being presented for you. Read these messages and teachings like they're speaking to you and see what hits. It's amazing what hits. It's almost a little spooky. It's like, how do they know?
Yeah, well, it would be, right? That is kind of part of a spiritual realm, and people like spirit entities guiding us and supernatural forces. I think part of it is a little spooky, and it makes sense why it is, because we natural beings, we're material flesh and blood beings. Something fully opposite to us, I think, would appear spooky, right? So that makes sense. The other part of what I was getting at here is I try to ask a lot of spiritual believers this question because I want to hear different perspectives and different answers to this. It's always something that has hung me up when it comes to spiritual beings. And it's plays off of this sort of opposites thing. We have the natural, the supernatural, we have the material, and the spiritual. They're sort of opposite substance, right? And first of all, I feel like the spiritual substance still has to be made of something. Otherwise, if the spiritual substance is complete absence, then where are these thoughts, these beings coming from? On top of that, if they are kind of opposite things, the natural and the supernatural, I don't understand how they can interact. So even just a soul inside my body, I'm unsure how it's contained in there. If it's not contained by material, how is my body containing it?
It's not so much it's not so much as a soul. I mean, the Bible talks and Christians talk about a soul, but it's really what I consider to be our spiritual consciousness. It it it's it's not really opposite. The material and the spiritual is not really opposite. It's just two perspectives of the same journey. And your consciousness that inhabits this physical body is not is contained within the body at this present time, but it's not permanent. We know that life ends, physical life ends, but our consciousness, our spiritual consciousness, our personality, our thought system continues. There is a continuity to life and existence that continues beyond this physical existence. Now, again, Christians would think that you're going to go to the good place or the bad place. But I believe that this spiritual realm that exists on the other side of this physical plane, there are, again, the people that Jesus dealt with, they could not have understood another dimension. Think about what we know, what we can comprehend today, that would have been so foreign to them. They would have thought that you were, you know, I mean, look at the witches. Look at the people that were burned at the stake in Salem. How many of those people were communicating with their own spirit teachers? They were being spoken to. They were told that, well, if you heard voices, you were a witch. What if they were just, receiving and being spoken to and thought and interpreting that as something negative, something that you shouldn't pay any attention to? So if the comprehension of a spiritual realm, an existence, like another dimension, another plane of existence, a higher plane, not necessarily above us, but at a different frequency that we can communicate with and cross over to, is a concept that I believe that people, you either accept or reject. And if you reject it, then you're pretty much stuck here in the physical plane with no avenues, no options once your body, your life ends in this physical realm. I know
Okay.
that just came to me that I've never thought about that before. So you're pulling a lot of new information out of me, which I appreciate. But
Well,
that
that's
just
cool.
came into my mind to explain it that way.
That's signs of a good conversation, I think, when both of us kind of get new ways of thinking, and I love that. So in fact, the way you explained kind of the spiritual and the natural world unified falls very much into sort of my metaphysics or view of the world, where I was telling you earlier how I view everything as a whole. Um, and then it sort of like splits down into parts. So you could say there's this whole which contains a spiritual and a natural realm, um, uh, which is kind of like a yin and yang type thing, really. You have the absence, you have the presence, the dark, the light, but it's all contained in the same system. So I guess this is really where I deem myself a naturalist mystic. Is it's kind of like, well, this system itself is a natural whole that just manifests in these different ways. So even if you're viewing consciousness as not necessarily a material thing, it's still like a natural part of this whole existence. And on top of that, I've always thought reincarnation is a really cool concept. I would love if it were true, because I think life is precious and it's beautiful that we get this fleeting moment to experience and then we die. It would be amazing if we were able to keep experiencing this rare, like mysterious life that we've been given. But I'm not sure. I like, obviously I don't really believe in like a soul that carries on or whatever. But I will say there's this type of reincarnation that I find really interesting and potentially could believe. It's just a type that doesn't carry your personality forward. It just it says that consciousness is a sort of a underlying substance of reality, that's always there. So when my consciousness dies out, there could be another consciousness that springs up that I would experience, like, but it would still be a new ego. It would be a new self. Like, I wouldn't carry over my personality, my memories, and all these things. It would just be a new consciousness arising that then I'm calling self. Like, I'm still the experiencer, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Although I believe that existence, not just this physical life, but existence for our consciousness is a progression. You build upon everything that you've learned, and that you would never, otherwise you'd just be starting over from scratch every single time. And if you can't build and learn on what you've already done, then you're not really going anywhere. You only go so far, you stop, then you start all over again. So that would be difficult for me, because we're on such a journey. And there is an outstanding movie that I recommend called Defending Your Life. Have you ever heard of that movie?
I don't think so.
Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep. It's an older
Yeah.
movie. And it's so old, I still have the original videotape in the original carton. That's how old it is. And on the carton itself, it says the true story about what really happens when you die. And the best line in the movie, the very best line in the movie, Rip Torn's in it, when Rip Torn looked healthy and not like he looked in Men in Black. And the best line in the movie is toward the end. And he said, "Don't go kicking yourself." He said, "You're not going to remember any of this." And we're not allowed to remember what we were before, because that would spoil the opportunity to learn and grow. You have to realize, I mean, you have to know within yourself that there is a continuity to life. And so Defending Your Life is an outstanding movie. And the second one that I recommend is called Always. That has Richard Dreyfuss and Holly Hunter. Those both deal with existence of a spiritual realm on the other side of this physical plane. And they're really well done, really well done.
Yeah. And to be fair, I understand your criticism, or not necessarily criticism, but reasoning as to why my explanation doesn't mesh well with your intuitions and your outlooks. I think that makes sense, right? Because I shared with you earlier that I'm very much someone who views life as progress, as continual progress, and I would never want to be stuck in a heaven that's just static and unchanging, and when no room for growth. So I think that that's very much a fair statement to make about it. What I would respond with is, I agree with you. There's a continuity to life and consciousness, in my opinion. So uh, essentially, how I would view this is there isn't necessarily a progress of the ego, of the self-conscious, the soul, as it were, in this type of reincarnation, but there is a collective progress of consciousness. So consciousness itself continues as a whole, as a group of people who learn moral principles, how to treat each other better and better and better as we move forward. So even if this consciousness dies out, I will have done something to impact some people around me, or to add to conversation like what we're doing, to progress thoughts, ideas, moral principles. And then just because my ego doesn't carry forward, a new one will arise with all of that new information now having evolved from this one.
I agree. And we're not that far apart. We
Yeah.
really aren't. I mean, we're really close. And it's really just the perspective and the material that I've been able to be associated with, that will just, it's more of so much more of a perspective, and the way that we look at existence and life, and that this is just so temporary. I mean, we're,
Mhm.
I had a T-shirt that said, "I'm here for a good time, not a long time."
Yeah.
Had one of those. So, um, and for people to be able to get in touch and be able to communicate with their own spirit teachers. When I was first looking for a publisher, I was on a number of different publisher websites. One of the websites asked questions about your work. One of the questions was, what makes your material unique? Why would anyone want to read this? Great question. And I was sitting where I'm sitting right now at my computer. I didn't really even ask for an answer. I just relaxed my mind. And an answer started to be dictated to my mind. It was 12 lines long. And I just typed it down as I was sitting. And this is not an answer that I would have ever come up with. May I share this answer with you and your audience?
Please.
So, again, the question was, what makes your material unique? And this is the answer that I was given. The uniqueness of any material is in the manner in which it touches the soul. An open and searching mind pulls the soul and the body in which it inhabits onward and upward with hunger and determination in its quest for spiritual nourishment, ever mindful that the path upon which we walk is the path toward God. Lives lived, experiences endured, goals accomplished, and loved ones lost are all encounters upon that path. Strive always for the highest possible communication with our Heavenly Father. Believe in yourself as the Father within you is guiding, leading, directing, and comforting you upon this journey that we call life. Blessings be upon you as you walk your chosen pathway. And that was not me. That was not me. I could have come up with an answer, but nothing like that.
Man, I have to write a few things down because I feel like I'm going to so many different things I want to get into. And we've already hit our mark, so um you let me know, and vice versa, I'll let you know if I have to go. One of us, I'm sure, will be bound to tap out at some point. So oh, sorry, I'm trying to pull the threads here. Okay. So I think one of the reasons, maybe you've read this from me, or you've had some intuitions about my experience, that maybe I'm a little jaded, a little stubborn about spiritual beings and God, because like I've shared with you, I've genuinely tried a lot, tried to soften my heart and open my mind to these things, without fruit. And I think that I think that you'll be able to understand this without it even discrediting your perspective in any way or your experience in any way. But what happened for me is I started recognizing the preciousness of this life and the fleeting nature of my body and this life. And I started realizing I'm putting so much time and energy into something that's beyond this life that I can't seem to get a hold of. Um, and it really started with the Mormon Church, because that was ingrained into me that this is the only truth. You can't find truth anywhere else. Um, so just a lot of time, I guess, flailing about and wasting my energy, my precious energy, on spiritual beings. And I think that it just hit me one day, like, I just need to focus on this now, myself, my body, my relationships, how I can better everything around me. All of this other stuff, even if it's there, doesn't seem to be serving me, or I'm just intuitively using it without knowing it. But yeah, so I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
The words silent companion just came into my mind. And I'm listening to you talk, and silent companion is what I was just given. That our lives are our lives, our choices and decisions are our own. And we walk a path, whether it's vocation, how we handle relationships, the people that we deal with, that we encounter on a daily basis, how we drive, how we handle rude people in traffic, how we handle dumb drivers. I'm an aggressive driver. My motto is lead, follow, or get out of the way. And so, but I'm courteous. If somebody wants to pass me, I'll let them go ahead and use them as a rabbit for state highway patrols. They'll chase them before they'll chase me.
Yep.
But we're again on a journey. What you're doing here is you're just helping so many people and offering these different perspectives of life and existence, and allowing people to share, like me, share this information, because we're all on a different path. But I believe that it converges in almost like a oneness of being, that we're not alone, that we have this spiritual connection, and no matter what we call it. And it is hard sometimes to reconcile between the spiritual and the religious. And then you have people that are so devout that actually know a guy who, if it's not in the Bible, it can't be true. And every word in the Bible has to be true. And there's an outstanding documentary. You're probably familiar with the channel A&E, Arts and Entertainment.
I've heard the name. Yeah, I don't pay
Arts and
attention.
Entertainment. It's an A&E channel. And they had put together a number of years ago a series called Mysteries of the Bible. And the last two were really the two best ones. And it was titled, Who Wrote the Bible? And it was two DVDs, one on the Old Testament, one on the New Testament. And it really talks about how the Bible came to be written. And it's an amazing documentary. A lot of people don't really understand or know how the various books in the Bible were chosen, how the King James Version of the Bible was assembled. There were books that were allowed to be in and books were not allowed to be in. It was chosen by a council. But people that, if you're dealing with Christianity and people with a foundation of faith, they just don't want to give up. They don't. Well, you may be right. You may be on the fringes of being right, but just in case you're wrong, I don't want to burn in hell. I don't want to be punished for the rest of my life because I wasn't true to the word, or I wasn't acceptance of another potential realm, the spiritual realm that exists, and a never-ending consciousness, and a never-ending existence that just continues to learn and grow. So, I understand, the journey, the path that you've taken is not that far away from mine, because I've gone through some of the same things and thoughts and feelings when I was younger. But being exposed to these messages and teachings from these spirit teachers, and seeing so many of these not only dictated word for word, but different names and different signatures given for the messages themselves. To me, there's no question that a spiritual realm exists on the other side of this physical plane, and that we are here for the journey, for the learning, and all we can do is make the best of it and learn what we can and go on to the next one.
Well, I want to reiterate, because although I'm not, fully there with you on the belief of all this, I do genuinely appreciate perspectives like this that give people more freedom to sort of live, because, you're talking about this person paralyzed by the idea of hell. I really appreciate perspectives that allow for this freedom, and you're going to have consequences for your actions. I mean, life has that for us all the time. It's not to say that you shouldn't try to make good decisions, but it's just some safety and some comfort in the notion that, the system's working for you. It's not trying to punish you for eternity just because you've made some wrong choices. So I think that's healthy. I think that's more of a positive direction for the people in our world if we can start heading belief more that way. So I'm wondering if you're okay to get into the weeds a little bit here on some maybe fun, interesting questions, your thoughts on certain things.
I'm game.
Cool. Well, so you were talking about one of these experiences you had that told you about Heavenly Father. And, we really don't we don't have to get into like politics or culture stuff too much. But one of the things that sort of I have an issue with these very big organized institutions that are patriarchal and all this stuff is that there is this top down story of like the father hierarchy. um and for me, I would like all my brothers and sisters to feel empowered and free to choose their spiritual paths and their lives ahead of them. And I think that throughout history, this hierarchy has done a big disservice to, a lot of like women or just people who don't fit that man mold, even who are a little bit softer. Myself, for example, I'm very masculine presenting and everything, but I have a lot of feminine qualities. I'm emotionally aware. So I'm just curious your thoughts on there. First of all, if you think there's also a heavenly mother, if it's just a one God who is portrayed as a father, we just say it because that's how the words have been used, or just your general thoughts there.
Well, I believe that in the spiritual realm, on the other side of this physical plane, we don't really, because we're not allowed to know, the various levels, the various realms that exist in the higher realms of even the spiritual realm. I believe that there must be a supreme being somewhere. Whether it would be called God or whatever name he would be given, and it feels like a he. Just these spirit teachers in all of these messages in 22 years, every one of these messages felt read like they were being given from a male perspective. There are people that say, that talk about she when they reference God. God is there and she's unhappy, and that just doesn't seem to fit with the perspective of a heavenly Father. But there, in this spiritual realm, it just seems like on the other side, which we have no ideas to the levels and the vastness of the spiritual realm, that there would be somewhere a supreme being. And the whole purpose of all of these angels, archangels, guardian angels, spirit guides, spirit teachers, master teachers, is to deal with not only every one of us on this planet, but all of the other intelligent life on other planets throughout the universe. And a lot of people don't realize the position that we're in. Earth could be, I don't know if we talked about this before, but Earth could be a punishment planet. We don't really know. And we sit outside on the outer edge of the Milky Way galaxy. I call us the low rent district of the Milky Way galaxy. And the Milky Way galaxy is 2,000 light years across. That's 186,000 miles a second times 2,000 years. It's 1,000 light years deep. And the next closest galaxy to our galaxy is Andromeda, and it's 30 light years away. So the vastness of this universe, the James Webb Telescope has photographed galaxies 7,000 light years away. And there are billions of stars, billions of galaxies rather, with trillions of potential planets, intelligent life, societies, civilizations. No idea how progressive they are, what they believe, what they know. And so in the spiritual realm, there would have to be enough spiritual teachers and guides and beings to be able to deal with all of that intelligent life and individuals throughout the universe. I mean, it's almost incomprehensible, the vastness of where we are and where we could be, and the potential that we've got when we cross over from this physical existence.
Yeah.
But most people don't have time for any of that. They're too busy raising the kids, working their jobs, repairing their cars,
right.
Going through day-to-day life. And which is what we're all doing, is we're dealing with day-to-day life. Mine just happens to be sharing this information because I have this material that I've been gifted with, with Wilma Jean, my mother, and these messages, and being able to represent her and the spirit teachers that shared this information. So, but we're
Well,
all on a journey, we're all on a path. And for some reason, I mean, I had a number of different jobs and was in the military and uh, gone through a divorce and had things in my life that were challenging. But, we all are on a journey, and this is the journey that we're at right now.
um, so specifically kind of going back to the father thing, the male thing, the he pronoun thing. So I guess what doesn't really make sense is when you say male, the male part specifically, I don't think really makes sense because that is language to refer to biological material, right? So a being that has a biological body that we've deemed as male, um, I don't see how that would make sense for a spiritual entity if they don't have chromosomes and all the different biological body things that we have. Um, so I think I'm still struggling with this, and I know maybe this is just the language that you're getting from the spirit guides and everything, and they're saying he. Who knows if they're just using language that makes sense to us or whatever else. Um, but I bring it up again. I just want to reiterate because from the history that I've observed, there has been a weaponization of this patriarchy, specifically coming from these organized dogmatic religions. That people like your mother, for example, there were early Christians who would speak to angels like this, and they were mostly women, and they would get burned at the stake by the church, and so then saying women can't talk, they can't talk to God, like they shouldn't be able to speak. So there is like a clear history of this authority being used in a detrimental way to women specifically. And I'm not saying that that means that you using God as he is bad or whatever else. It's just maybe it's just something that we humans have done for so long that that's just the language. Whenever we say God, we say he because that's kind of how we associate it. But in reality, I almost feel like they would be genderless in the first place. If gender is supposed to mark out biology, yeah, I don't really see how it makes sense for any spiritual entity to have, a he or a her.
I agree. I agree. And I don't think that these spirit teachers, as far as their existence, I don't believe that they are male or female because they're spiritual. If you don't, like you said, if you don't have a physical body, how can you be one or the other? And the masculine and feminine qualities that people have that are joined in a physical body that we live in this physical existence because we are physical beings. Like you said, you have some feminine qualities of communication and feelings and that sort of thing, and I think we all have that. And
Yeah.
that's just something that you have to deal with in this physical existence. So I don't feel that spirit guides or spirit teachers are uniquely male always, but these spirit teachers in these messages that Wilma Jean received, they repeatedly refer to themselves in first person. And you'll notice that you said that you had read some of the book, and you'll notice that they speak about themselves in this first person. We feel, we believe, we advise. Our view encompasses more than your view can comprehend. One line in a message said, "We hear this. I'm sorry. Uh, we communicate. We communicate more than your view can comprehend."
Mhm.
And they speak about themselves in this way as in first person. And in one of the messages that Wilma Jean received in volume 2, it was a long message, 2 full pages, single space typed, no paragraphs. And these spirit teachers had been referring to themselves that way. And she stopped about a third of the way down on the second page. And she said, "Who is the I and the we that's presenting this information. And they congratulated her for asking and gave a 3-paragraph description of who they are.
Hmm.
And it was telling. I mean, it was really revealing to hear them explain about who they are and how they deal with us on a one-to-one basis. So I know that's a little
Yeah.
off the base from your question itself, but
No,
that
yeah, I think that we agree pretty well here. Um, so really, in fact, I'm glad you brought up the pronouns they use, the we pronouns specifically. I think that's pretty cool. There's a lot of passages in Genesis that sort of supposedly is God talking to humans, but it says we created man in our image. It uses the we pronouns. So it's kind of cool that these guys do that same thing. It's almost like they view themselves as a collective, like they are the spiritual realm, rather than, you know, and they may still have individuality to a degree. But I think that us humans, we very much view our egos as individual, and that's how our experience is. But maybe in the spiritual realm, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And they say we because they kind of are a collective. So that's the other thing too. It reminded me of mysticism again. The language that they use that's saying we're giving you more than you can comprehend, or our outlook is more than you can comprehend. That's one of the like pillars of mysticism, is that this experience is ineffable, or it's beyond us. We can't actually describe it fully.
I agree. And so many of these messages that are signed, they are signed with a singular name,
Mm.
your loving guide, your loving spiritual teacher, but yet they continually refer to themselves in plural, we, our, and us. And it's almost like there's a collaboration going on where a group of spirit teachers have gathered together to present this message. And they refer to themselves in plural, but yet the message itself is being signed by a singular name.
Interesting.
But then some of the messages are signed in plural. Your
Mm.
loving spiritual teachers. Wilma Jean received a message to her that was signed, your spiritual counterpart. I have messages that were addressed to me that were signed, your spirit brothers, your spirit light. So
Yeah.
we don't really know who the various entities are that are presenting this information, but they are doing it as a collaboration, like you said, and allowing this information to be shared. And
Mm.
if it applies to people that read it and they feel that they're being spoken to and that they're being encouraged to be able to put together a relationship with their own spirit guides and spirit teachers. We're not required to obey. It's just information. It's just advice. It's just guidance. And because of pesky little thing called free will, we can keep our life on the straight and narrow, or we can screw up royally, and it's up to us.
Well, I told you earlier that I think we have probably some pretty big disagreements with free will, but I think it would be a lot for us to get into and maybe take up a lot of time. Um, uh, Basically, I wanted to ask, and no worries if this isn't an option, or is there anything we could do here together, me and you, where you can help me soften my mind, or you can soften your mind, sort of get a glimpse into maybe my spirit guides, or your spirit guides give you advice on how I should talk to mine. Just anything at all we could do here right now that could help me connect to them and have an experience.
I think, and this is just my own personal opinion. I think you said you were already reading volume 1 of the book. An
Hmm.
angel told me so. When you read the content of these messages and teachings, And when we get off the air here, I offer on my website, spiritspeaks.com, on the contact page, I offer 3 messages from volume 2, including the message where the 2 spirit teachers moved in the same session. And being able to incorporate this information into your thought system and all of the listeners and people that follow you in your podcast. I believe that that is the material that allows you to move forward, allows anyone to move forward in their spiritual progression. That just came into my mind. We're on a spiritual progression, we're on a path, and being able to read and see the information that someone else received, just like any of the other books that you've read, mystics, there are people that communicate with the other side, psychics, mediums, that sort of thing. And in these movies that I'll share some additional information when we end the conversation here, that's all that you can do really, is to be on that journey and allow this information to come into your mind, and you can use your own free will, and you can choose to handle yourself in a certain situation in a certain way, deal with people in a certain way, make choices as far as your life, your business pathway, the people that you book on your interviews. All of that is something that you're choosing to do because you think it might be of interest to you and your listeners. So that's the journey that we're on, and I can't really share anything more than that as far as how you and I could interrelate and be able to, only because of the background that I have and the material that I've absorbed, that pretty much tells me that I'm on a path that I should be on. That's the best way that I can explain it. And I appreciate your having me and as a guest.
Well, absolutely. It's always nice when I don't have to do much work, because I just have my email on my channel, and then some representative reaches out and says, "Hey, this person would be up for talking to you." And so, yeah, I love seeing the fruits of just having my email listed somewhere and then people contact me. So happy to have you. I like talking to pretty much anybody, really. I think it's, part of my sort of natural mystic journey, relates a lot to Plato and his writings with dialogue. And I genuinely think there is ultimate truth and stuff to be discovered here. And the main way we do it is by relating through dialogue, comparing our experiences, comparing our beliefs, and trying to progress our ideas. So yeah, definitely happy to have you, and I'm really excited for this one. It's been a great conversation, to be honest. I guess, is there any, I always offer my guests, to push back on my thoughts or just ask questions, or even if you just have advice for me, anything at all you'd want to say to me?
Not that, I mean, I think it's just been a great conversation and discussion. And if I can just share this information as we close here, my website is spiritspeaks.com. The book is An Angel Told Me So. First of 3 volumes, dictated from spirit teachers from the other side. And the book is available on my website. Barnes & Noble, any Barnes & Noble in the country can order it. It's in their system. Ingram is my national distributor. If people have their own independent bookstore they like to deal with, they all deal with Ingram. And the book is available on Amazon. Everything's available on Amazon.
Yeah. Yes.
So I really enjoyed this, Kay. And like I said, I will, once we close the recording here, I'll share some additional information that you can take a look at. And then, I appreciate any feedback you care to share.
Okay. Well, sounds good. Sounds like a natural close there. So thank you again for coming, Michael. And thank you, anybody out there listening. Appreciate you guys being here.